share my screen. Got that? I do not have a ton of slides that I'm going to use tonight, but we are going to talk about resume. Let's see here. Oh, being recorded. Okay. Hang on. Play from start. All right. Cool. All right. So tonight we're going to talk about resumes, and the intent of this is for it to be totally interactive. So if you have questions along the way, please certainly ask them. And how many people brought a copy of their resume? All right. So we got some folks that did. Okay. Wonderful. Yeah. If you pull it up on your phone or whatever, that's fine. And so, yeah, maybe at various points we may stop and have you guys kind of go through and maybe try and find some ways that you can spruce something up on your resume, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But so when we talk about a resume, I mean, obviously everybody knows what it is, right? I mean, this is kind of the number one piece in your sort of job. So it's something that everybody has. I actually tell people the most important thing is your LinkedIn profile, because that's the one thing that everybody will see. Not everybody you encounter in your job search is going to see your resume, but everybody's going to see your LinkedIn profile. But this is where we're not here to talk about LinkedIn tonight. So, but you know, the goal of a resume is really to get you an interview, right? It's essentially, it's not there to tell your full story. That's what I tell people. It's essentially your highlight reel, and the goal of it is to get you an interview, to be a tool to get you an interview. Ideally, it's gonna get you an interview in a situation that's got some context behind it, right? Your goal really in your job search is always to try and seek out and find a live body, a warm person at a company, and get your resume into their hands so that maybe you can ideally have a conversation with them, sit down, have a cup of coffee with them, but maybe at a minimum, send them an email where you can put a little bit more context around who you are and why you're interested in the job, why you think you'd be a good fit. But so that's the ideal, but in some situations, yeah, you may just be blasting this into cyberspace. It's going to be run through the applicant tracking system. And again, the goal is to try and get you an interview. So tonight, what we're going to talk about is just kind of the blocking and tackling of putting the old resume together, some kind of rules of thumb, and how we can hopefully make it better. And again, ask questions along the way, make it interactive. And so obviously, we're just going to kind of run through the anatomy of your resume here. This is mine here on the right. Mine does not contain everything. We'll sort of discuss on the left for reasons I'll get into. But
can you zoom it, make it bigger?
Is there any way to make it bigger?
Go to your document itself and make your document bigger. You're sharing that document, right?
But yeah, it's part of a slide.
Well,
and
I can't see anything.
Okay. Well, I'm going to talk through it, and we will definitely post this. And yeah, you can pull it up. You can pull the Zoom up on your phone. Maybe that. No. Okay. Anyway, we'll roll ahead and we'll definitely post this for folks to follow up with. So, okay. So starting at the top, obviously you want to have your contact information. The things that you want to make sure you've got on there: have your cell phone number, have your email address, and have your LinkedIn profile. Make sure you get a personalized LinkedIn profile where you sort of map that to your name, right? And you can go online and you can kind of Google how to do that if you don't know how to do that. I'm not going to walk through that tonight, but it's a fairly easy process where I believe you go into just like your profile and you can sort of rename yourself on LinkedIn, and it'll be something that is you can choose something and it'll tell you if it's already been taken or whatever. But you can do that, and then kind of goes without saying, but also just make sure you have both a professional sounding email and I guess what I would call a relevant, fresh email, right? So like if you're using Hotmail, AOL, something that no one has used for 20 years, ditch that and get yourself a Gmail account, just so people don't think that you're 100 years old, right? As much as we don't want to think age discrimination is a thing, it is a thing. So try not to make yourself look any older than you are. So make sure you do that. There's some debate on whether or not you should include your location on there. I've heard sort of pros and cons of both. I think you want to customize your resume as much as you can to each individual application. I think if it is an opportunity that is going to have in office and you are in that geography, it probably makes sense to put your geography on there. But all you need to put is city and state. Don't put your home address on there. You don't need it. It's too much. I've actually heard that there are situations where people will look you up and they will profile you based on where you live, whether you're rich or you're poor, et cetera, et cetera. So if it is a in-office Nashville job, fine. And you live in Nashville or you live close to Nashville, just put Nashville on there, put Nashville area on there, right? That will be a feather in your cap versus all the people that are applying that don't live in Nashville and would have to relocate or want to try and convince them to make it remote, et cetera, et cetera. So do that. So that's pretty simple. Contact information. Next is something I don't have on my resume, but I've seen a lot of people put on there, is just to list up here at the top job titles of what you're seeking, right? Put up to 3 with sort of bars in the middle. Some say that helps with the applicant tracking system, that if you will put the actual job titles up there, that will be beneficial. I can see that. I also think that it looks kind of stupid and is somewhat redundant. So I don't have it on my resume, but there are templates out there that have it. And, like I said, it may make sense in a situation where you're applying online and you can't figure out a better way to apply online. That may be something to just throw onto the resume. But yeah, go ahead.
So I played with that.
Yeah.
A little bit. I was told, it's hiring managers don't read the whole resume, they just read the top. And so putting your title, but then a couple of little words underneath to say what is it you do?
Yes.
So it's like a headline.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. I mean, I've got that on here, but some folks will have just up at the top will have just the titles of the sort of positions that you're seeking, and they'll match kind of exactly if you're smart. The one you're applying for, you'll have one of those match exactly, and then your other 2 will be maybe some derivation of that. Again, people say that helps with the ATS system. So I think maybe in a situation where the only way you can figure out how to apply is online, and it's going into the ATS and you're at the mercy of it, it may be worth putting that on there. But in general, I think it's just kind of taking up unneeded space. So I don't have it on mine. All right. So next section is kind of career summary. So this is kind of going back to some of you may have heard me talk about before, your personal branding statement. So you want to kind of make this specific to the role. You don't want to be too salesy, but this is where you're going to talk about kind of yourself and kind of who you are. So in my case, finance executive with 20 years experience, investment banking, corporate banking and finance, corporate development and strategy, operational finance roles with Fortune 500 companies and leading corporate investment banks, extensive experience in corporate finance, M&A, LBOs, equity and debt financing, financial planning and analysis. Results-driven leader, technical expert, cultivator of talent is mine. But again, it's probably three sentences that sort of set up, who you are and what it is that you do. And again, this is one that I would have, you don't necessarily need to make it completely different for everything you ever apply for, but I would definitely have 2 or 3 different versions of this that sort of speak specifically to the different jobs that you're applying for. And then under it is where you list your skills. I have expertise includes with the semicolon and then or the colon, sorry, and then listing out the individual skills. And that is where you definitely, it's the lowest hanging fruit, is to make sure that these skills align with the skills that are asked for in the in the job description, right? And so you want to definitely make sure you put those on there. There are, there are various services out there. I think most of them charge. There may be some that are free, that will actually sort of match up your resume to a job description, and it will give you kind of a score of how closely it matches it. And I think they will give you suggestions of here are things that they're looking for, like where they're looking for strategy and you don't have strategy mentioned anywhere. So you either need to go in and work it into one of your bullets in your work experience, or into your skills, etc. But there are a number of different applications out there that will do that for you. But like I said, you want to, there are, I think in the resources section page I've got here, there are some lists, but there are tons of lists out here, on the web that you can pull up that just have, reams of skills, and just make sure, pick the ones that are relevant. Yeah, go ahead.
I've used JobScan.
Yeah, JobScan is one.
How does it work? Just like what he said?
Yeah, literally you put the job description in, you put your resume in, and it'll tell you a score. You want to be above 75%, but obviously we need it as high as possible. And I know there are other ones, but I just
Is it free?
the first 5 scans are free, and then you have 5 subscriptions.
5 a month or 5 total?
5 total are free. Or you can just change your email.
There's always a workaround. So, okay, any questions on skills? All right. So next is, again, this is something that I don't have on my resume, but I get a lot of questions about this, and I'll at the end I'll provide a link to a guy that I just found on YouTube. I think he's actually in Ireland, and I think his website is Paddy Jobs. I don't think that's really or Jobsman. I don't think that's really his last name. But he's actually got some really good content out there. I did sign up for like his, give me your email and I'll add you to my email list. He does have some good templates that you can get for free. He obviously does sell stuff, but thus far he hasn't bombarded me with emails. It doesn't appear that they've sold my email to any nefarious characters. You don't have to give them your cell phone. I know a lot of times now that everybody wants your cell phone number, and then you just get inundated with calls. But I've got a link at the end. You can check him out. But he had this suggestion, and I think it's a good one. So I run into this a lot. Sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but I run into this a lot with folks who are either career changers, or they did something 20 years ago and now they kind of want to go back to it. And it's this: do I list my work history chronologically, or do I do more of what people refer to as a functional resume? And I'm not a huge fan of the functional resume. I think most people are accustomed to the chronological sort of normal resume. But I think the way that you get around that is, if you are a job changer or a job returner, I guess, if you will, you're going back to do something that you haven't done in, call it 10 years plus. I think what you want to do is you want to add a section here that kind of looks just like my professional experience section that says core competencies and achievement. And I put on here, just use only if you're a career changer, right? And so you would add a center title like that, and then you would list out in bullets, similar to how you do your work experience, your core competencies and examples of those, right? So, it could be, sales training, right, is a core competence. And then you could list your examples of, how many people you've trained over a period of time, et cetera, right? And so if you're trying to pull out those skills that you have, list the skill and then put an example of that skill, right? And you could add a section where you could do 6 or 8 of those that are relevant to what it is you're trying to seek. I think is the best way to, like I said, if you're a career changer and you're trying to sort of do something different than what you're doing, that you've been doing, but you're trying to make the case, but I've got the skills to do that role. So does that make sense? Does anybody questions on that? So, all right, cool. All right, so the next is obviously the biggest section, is work history. So, you want to list in reverse chronological order. You really want to focus on the last 10 years of your experience here. Got that. And again, if you're not going to focus on the last 10 years, you add that core competencies and achievements section up here. But you really want to focus on your last 10 years. You want to use as many action verbs as you can, right? Get a thesaurus. Try not to use the same ones over and over. I led, I created, achieved, etc. And so this is maybe where we'll take a little bit of time. So you want to quantify and contextualize your achievements, right? This is the biggest one, right? You want to demonstrate the success that you've had. And so you always want to be thinking about ways that you can quantify and then also provide some context around that, right? And so, in this case, reduce operating, don't just say reduce operating costs. Say reduce operating costs 20%, or $20 million or 15% via implementation of rigorous zero-based budgeting process. So for those of you that have your resumes, why don't you pull them out now? Why don't you go through them and take a couple of minutes and look for a bullet point that you got on your resume, and what could you come up with a way that you could make that more quantifiable? And we'll take a couple of minutes here, and then maybe we'll go around the room and see if folks found some things and get some examples. All right. Is anybody brave enough to give me an example? Something maybe you found on your resume that you can quantify a little bit more? Anybody online? Anybody on Zoom wanna? You gonna do it? Here you go.
So my job is market research, and one of the challenges is I'm not necessarily tied to P&L. So being able to quantify things has always been a little difficult because I sort of support other functions in terms of kind of their deliverables. So one of my challenges is how to put numbers to things.
Okay.
But the example I have here, partnered with senior leaders on 5-year multi-branded approach, influencing vision and strategy and informing new growth opportunities. What I could potentially add is generating X amount of like revenue or something, if I could find like that right number, just to put a figure to that.
Yeah. I mean, you could say something. Yes. I mean, if you had that, you could say, developing a plan to drive 15%, annual sales growth, or it could be, informed creation of a, 5 initiative plan designed to, accelerate, company growth, something like that. I mean, yeah, you probably have to spend a little bit more time kind of getting into the specifics of what you've done. But yeah, I understand the challenge. Obviously, if you work in sales, right, or if you work in production, or if you're in financial planning analysis, right, it's easy to say manage the budget, manage the $300 million budget versus manage the budget, right? So it's a little lower hanging fruit, but I think it's thinking of those, how many, what parts of the organization did you touch, and how can you quantify that? Number of initiatives that you assisted on, number of brands that you worked with, or however it, just again, think of as many ways as you can to sort of put at least some quantification in and around it. So, but agreed. Recognize that some jobs are certainly easier than others. Anybody else? All right. Let's see here. All right. So maybe we'll do the same thing. So again, yeah, the next is, using, timing descriptors to sort of quantify, right? So you did this in, a certain amount of time, right? So instead of, develop sales training for XYZ organization, it's, comprehensive training program for 75 new sales associates in a 6-month time frame. So take a look at your resumes again quickly, not so quickly, but I'll give it a minute or so. See if there's anything that you can add from kind of a timing standpoint. Anybody else find anything? Anybody else? No? All right. All right. Tough crowd. All right. Where were we? All right. So yeah, again, I mentioned last 10 years. So this is something I've seen it kind of formatted a couple of different ways, but it's always kind of the same thing. Obviously, a lot of us have been out in the workforce for some time, had a lot of different jobs. So, sometimes I get the question like, okay, well, I've been working for 30 years. Am I trying to sort of fill in all that time, bridge all the way back to when I was in college, et cetera? I don't necessarily think it's imperative that you do. I'm kind of OCD, so I guess it makes me feel better if I do. But what I will say is, again, that experience that's more than 10, certainly more than 15 years old is not really very relevant. I do.
Because in my experience, I've had my own consulting firm for 28 years. So it won't make sense for me to just put that one thing. I have to say, prior to this, I was at AT&T's national sales training. Because
yeah,
right.
So
sure, yeah.
So 2 or 3 experiences.
Yes.
Most people don't have 28 years, right?
That's true.
For
Good point.
Job. So it could be like 2 or 3, and you can hop. If there's a job in the past that was extremely relevant to what you're trying to do today, you can bring that in, right? The resume is not a legal document, it's not a legal representation of every employer.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. No, I guess I was thinking more from the standpoint of, I've had, I don't know, 7 or 8 different jobs in my professional career. At some point, you run out of space. I am a big believer, don't go more than 2 pages. Some people have differences of opinion with that. My buddy Patty Jobsman, he'll say go 3 or 4 pages. I just tend to disagree on that. I honestly don't think most people get past the first page. So really, if you've been out in the workforce for 10, 15 years, I think 2 is fine, but the odds are no one's probably going too far into page 2. So certainly if you're pressed for space, you don't need to list out every single job you've ever had. But like I said, if you want to sort of close the loop and go kind of all the way back to your education, a simple way to do it is kind of what I've done here, which is just to list additional experience includes, and just list the name of the company that you work for, the location, your title, and the time that you were there. One line. And so then this way, I mean, these are kind of my first 2 jobs. This you can fill in, 5 jobs and 5 lines on your resume and kind of show, okay, here's where I worked for the first, however long, 15 years of your career. And look, that may be a conversation starter. Someone may take notice of it. So I think it can be worthwhile to have on there, because you just never know the connections you make, where people, you may have worked at the same company earlier in your career. So I think it can be worthwhile to have on there, but not as relevant to sort of spell out here were all my specific duties in these roles, if those duties are not, particularly relevant to what you're applying for. Again, if they are, then create that core competencies and achievements section, put them up top, right? Don't rely on them getting to page 2 of the resume to see them and see that you did them back in, 1998. So it's probably the best way to do it. Education, reverse chrono, and yeah. I occasionally, you don't, if you went to college, you don't need to put your high school on there. And GPA, kind of rule of thumb, it's always been if it's 3.5 or better, you can put it on there. I probably should take mine off, just because I do feel like if there becomes a point in time when it's not really that relevant anymore once you've been working for 20 years. So I probably should take mine off. But let's see here. Some recruiters reviewed my resume and said I should move dates my education. Okay.
Yeah,
that's an interesting thought.
But I took the year off.
Okay.
It's just at the bottom.
Is that just because it's not relevant, or is that to sort of avoid an age discrimination, or
kind of, keeping it fresh.
Okay.
Like you said, I think the last 10 years the most relevant. I'm just looking at my resume, thinking about it as a time to start dropping some things off.
Okay. I think that's fine. I mean, again, to Scott's point, it's not a legal document, right? And if they want, if they ask you what year did you graduate from Kentucky, you're probably going to have to tell them. They may want to get an official transcript, make sure that you actually went to school there. I mean, and they're going to see when you went. But at that point, you probably already have the job. Yeah. So I wouldn't worry too much about it at that point. So yeah, no, I think that's fine. I will say I'm a big fan on kind of that point of I've always only put years on my resume. I think putting months on there just makes it too busy. It's not really very relevant, and frankly, it can only hurt you. I mean, honestly, if you are out of work for a period of time, you can kind of make that go away just by where the sort of years fall. Maybe not, maybe so. If you just sort of put the years on there, you can kind of avoid that. You can also kind of make it look like if you worked someplace for 6 months and it didn't really work out, you might make it look like you were there a little bit longer. Again, some companies have their application that they want you to fill out, and they'll have the month and year and all that stuff. So if they want to ask, I don't encourage people to lie, but you can definitely kind of make things look a little bit better on the resume. Again, the idea with the resume is to get the interview, right? And it's not a legally binding document. Again, not telling you to lie, but you just put the years on there. You're not lying to anybody. Just kind of makes things look better. So
we do have some access to so much information, so much detail, especially because their own situation. But we get caught up in thinking we have to tell everyone everything. And that's not the case. I mean, even in life, you don't have to tell everybody all your business. You know, that's part of being an adult, having some privacy, things like that. So the resume is kind of that same reflection.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your resume is a highlight reel, right? I mean, that's the idea, is it's a highlight reel. So, you know, everything on it should reflect pretty positively about you. Again, people may want to dig in and they may, you know, get into, well, why did you leave this opportunity or leave this job? And maybe there was a little bit of mess there, and you're going to have to sort of think through the best way to sort of convey that and put it in the best light. But, you know, yeah, you shouldn't have to do that on the resume, especially where you can't provide any context with it. So, yeah, no, totally. All right. And then let's see here. Okay, yes, we talked about education. And lastly, it's just credentials and other. And, you know, I don't think there's any one size fits all to this. I just kind of list my professional licenses on here. A lot of people like to put their volunteer work on there. You know, one point I would definitely make is, you know, you can put your volunteer work down here. But if you're super involved with something or that's kind of what you're spending your time doing while you're in between jobs, don't be afraid to move it up here, right? I mean, don't be afraid to put a volunteer position up in your work experience, talk about what you're doing. That's far more impressive than just having a gap in employment where they think you're sitting on the couch all day, right? And so don't be afraid to do that. If you know, if it's something that you spend a lot of time with, that's pretty meaty. So that's definitely something to think about. You know, some people put their personal interests on there. I think that's fine. I mean, again, I just wouldn't, you never want this stuff to probably take up more than about a third of a page. If you do that, again, if you're doing that much volunteer work or it's that involved volunteer work, move it up into your professional experience. I see people do that. I mean, I see people work that in, even that have jobs where, you know, they're working full time and that's their job, but then under it, they'll list as the next, you know, I serve on the board of this nonprofit, you know, and that's the dates are whenever they started to present. And it's just like a second job that they have, and they'll list that in there. So I think that's perfectly fine to do. So if it's that involved, just move it up. Don't have it take up more than a third of a page for sure. And yeah, you can list your certifications on there, volunteer work that you do. You know, I would be careful in and around sort of political activities, anything that people might find controversial, right? I mean, if you're the, you know, MAGA chair for Williamson County, yada, yada, hey, I'm not here to say there's anything wrong with that, but you might not want to put that front and center on the resume. Somebody sees that, they may get an impression of you and they may not want to talk to you. So again, just anything that you think could be somewhat controversial, just leave it off of the resume. The idea is to get you the interview, not to be not to start a debate.
Along with the idea of knowing your audience.
Yeah, that's right.
Different resumes for different purposes.
That's right.
So if you're wanting to live in whichever world it is that you're throwing that stuff out there, then that's good for you.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Yeah, and look, I'm not here to talk politics at all, but look, if you were applying for a position with the, you know, Republican Party of Tennessee, sure, that would be a great thing to put on there. But if you were applying for, you know, just a run-of-the-mill role in corporate America, that may not be the thing to put on there. So again, just be mindful of a good way to put it, be mindful of your audience and anything that you think could be construed as controversial. You know, I'm not telling you not to do it. Just leave it off the resume. Any other questions on that?
One other question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I have a traditional format like you have, but I've actually talked with friends who were in hiring positions, and they talked about some of the more, I would say, modern resumes where you've got kind of the vertical, like 1/3 line and it's kind of like bullets.
Like
and-
listing stuff down
Yes.
on the edge?
Yes.
Okay.
And then even people putting pictures or different fonts and things like that. So do you have any, I know it's very subjective, but
Yeah.
in terms of, I was told, depending on the company, if it's a company that's a bit more forward thinking, one of those, that style of resume may be more fitting versus maybe a traditional, like long-standing company, just kind of
Right.
to the same point you're making, thinking about your audience and just if you have any opinions on what's maybe good or bad or.
I
other
mean,
thoughts.
I'm a finance and accounting old stick in the mud, so I like the traditional. But that's yeah, it's more of a personal preference. I mean, I don't like stuff that gets a little too graphic design, a little too cute. I mean, I guess it maybe if you live in that world, maybe that's what people expect. I frankly just don't know. I mean, I don't know if you're I would assume if you're a graphic designer, you have a resume. They don't really care too much about what the resume looks like. You probably have a portfolio of work that you've done, which is more of what they're interested in. But that may be a world where it's a little bit more. I mean, I've heard the ATS systems actually like the white space and the generic formats more. But again, you know, I've always said the goal is really not to maximize ATS score. My goal is always to circumvent the ATS process and find a live person in the company. So I wouldn't suggest, you know, a resume format just for that. So, you know, I think some of it just kind of, you know, it's what you're comfortable with to a degree. I'm not sure it matters a whole lot. But if you feel better about the resume that you hand somebody because it looks a certain way and you saw this template and you just think it looks really good, I wouldn't discourage somebody from using that. But yeah, again, I'm not sure it necessarily matters. I think some industries, and maybe it just makes sense if you talk to a recruiter, somebody in the industry, like, is this important? Are there formats that you see that you think recruiters like better? And they might give you, you know, heads up on that.
I switched over to the modern one.
Okay.
Because it's more visually easy for me.
Okay.
But I noticed that when I upload the file during the application process, it can't figure this out.
Okay.
So I'm having to go in manually, or even there's been times that I just don't even upload it automatically. I just go in my.
Right. Yeah. And again, back to you're probably going to have multiple versions. I mean, I know sometimes it can drive you nuts having all these different versions, and then you find a typo in one, and you got to remember to change it 6 times. But you could have 2 versions, right? You could have just the stock version that looks like this, that I do think the ATS systems like better, and then you could essentially replicate this onto something that's a little bit more modern and easier on the eyes, and maybe that's what you hand to people. Maybe they prefer to see that.
Yeah, that's what that's the advice that I got was
Okay.
hiring managers, when they have to keep looking at like the more common style, those resumes stand out just visually.
Okay.
And that's the thing, it goes back to having different styles for different purposes. I said that goes to different styles for different purposes. I know in the past when I've been between jobs, and if you accept unemployment, they want to track how many jobs you've got, when you applied, who you're applying to. So I would keep a folder for every application. And with that, I would save a copy of the resume that I had submitted at that point in time.
Okay.
So that if I got an interview, I could print that resume out and know what they were seeing when they were talking to me. That could take, I guess, one I had modified at that point, maybe a month later or something, but at least I knew what that company saw when I submitted it, what it looked like.
That's smart.
So, and then if you have different kinds of jobs or different, you know, you could keep those resumes and use this one for this job and this for that kind of job title, you know, just change it up. And then you might even find one might be maybe more successful than another, depending on the circumstance.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Any other questions on or comments on format? I think that's all really good. Yeah, I think it's always a topic for debate and discussion. All right, well, that kind of walks through the resume itself, and these are just some other, you know, kind of thoughts, ideas. that I kind of have around and discussion of some other thoughts. So, one thing I do think it's important is don't be cliche, in your resume, right? And kind of what I say is, describe the hard work. Don't describe yourself as hardworking, right? I mean, things are like, I'm hard worker, I'm a early riser, whatever. I mean, stuff that's kind of cliche. That's not what recruiters are looking for. They do want to see the sort of demonstrated results of what you've done, right? And I think through that, they will understand that you're a hard worker, right? So I do think that's good advice. I think, I talk about this some in the kind of journey series that I put together. Always be thinking of the pain points that you address, right? And I think that's important for the resume. I think that's vitally important for if you can get an interview with folks, if you can get coffee with folks, right? It's what I refer to as this entrepreneurial mindset, right? I mean, I know probably not many of you in this room are or want to be, independent contractors, consultants, right? Maybe some of you do, but most of you probably don't. Most of you are probably looking for a, job where someone employs you and pays you and, how you have that stability. But it's a great way to think of things, right? If I had to knock on the door at this company and I had to convince them to hire me as a consultant, what would I tell them that I could do, right? What could I do for them? What is something that they have trouble with? What is a pain point of theirs that I can help remedy? I mean, that's the key, man. That's the secret sauce. And then when you're in an interview, if you can identify what somebody's pain point is and talk about how you experienced the same pain point and how you dealt with it and how you helped remedy, that's how you build that connection. That's how you build that camaraderie with somebody, right? I mean, it's like swapping war stories, right? It's like, oh yeah, man, we had that same problem. How did you all deal with that? Yeah, we came up with this great solution where oh, that's amazing. We struggled with that for a year. You guys got that, remedied in 3 months. Yeah, it was a team effort, but that's where they're just like, okay, this is somebody I got to have on my team, right? So again, I know we're talking resumes tonight, but it's just a great mindset to have kind of throughout your entire process. I mentioned I'll at the end here I'll go through the kind of resources that I identified. There's a lot of talk around AI, just in general with everything these days, right? But you can get on YouTube and stuff, and you can find plenty of people that talk about using AI to write resumes and things like that. I think AI is a great tool if you're to get unstuck, right? Like if you're trying to write a description of a particular role that you had or a particular project or something, yeah, put some AI prompts into ChatGPT, get it started, get a couple of sentences going on describing it. I think it can be a great way to sort of get something down on a piece of paper. I know, myself going back to school, college, whatever. I mean, sometimes it's just like you're staring at that blank page and you're just trying to get something down. It can be great to start that process. But you got to make sure that you make it your own, right? You really got to make sure that, okay, you're going to start with that, but you're going to do some real heavy editing to it to kind of make it your own and highlight you as a person, not some generic resume that was written by ChatGPT. Another suggestion that this guy Patty talks about, which I think is a great suggestion as well, is you can use job postings for similar jobs. When they talk about sort of the roles and responsibilities in that job, you could just copy and paste those from, I wouldn't do it from the specific job you're applying to because that may be a little too close for comfort, but find a similar job. He actually suggests, like he's in Ireland, so he suggests, search for the same job in the United States and it'll be written a little bit differently and that'll kind of cover, but yeah, just grab that and then put it on your resume and then kind of tweak it to make it your own, right? Fill in the specifics around what you did. And then you'll have kind of an experience bullet point that is point blank written for that specific job. So I think that's a great way to do it as well. Just a quick, just kind of silly note, not silly note, but just simple stuff. Always upload the PDF. Unless they ask for the Word version, just always upload PDF. Word gets wonky and weird when it moves around and it's read on different devices and things like that. PDFs always should look the same, and sometimes they get a little wonky, but a lot less wonky than Word. So just always make sure that you're uploading a PDF unless it's specifically asked for the Word file. And then you can never have enough friends review your resume. We're happy to do it here. Always happy to take a look at it. But seriously, have your friends do it. Even if they're folks that don't really understand what you do, sometimes those are the folks that can just catch the typos and the grammatical errors, or if you've got something on there that just doesn't make any sense, that you've read it 50 times and it makes sense to you because you knew what you were trying to say, but they don't really know what you do, and they read it and they're just like, I don't understand what you're talking about. So yeah, again, you can never have enough folks take a look at your resume and help you out. And that's really about it. Again, I really encourage you to check this guy out. I just, like I said, I'm not promoting him, so to speak, but I just found him on YouTube, PattyJobson.com, or you can just search for him on YouTube. He's got some great stuff. He's got a whole tutorial on AI, and using that. He's got some good templates out there if you're just looking for a template to start with, and he will give you those for free. I think he has paid service where, you can hire him to write your resume and all that good stuff. But he's definitely worth checking out. Writing tips, the Resume Genius blog is good. And then, Chameleon Resumes, 5 Common Executive Resume Mistakes. I thought it was a good article. So that's about it. Questions, comments? Make this more interactive. Any suggestions for that? This idea, when I say workshops, the idea is for them to be a little bit more interactive. So looking for ways to do that.
I thought with the numbers you were going to give some sort of parent.
Those are just left over from last week.
Oh, okay.
So yes. So I missed that announcement. So first off, kudos to those who came. There were a few of you that came last week. So big thanks for those who came. And I'm not shaming those who didn't. But the idea was for us to do like a kind of speed networking, and we only ended up with about 5 people here, maybe 6. So we didn't really have enough to do that. So we just did kind of a roundtable kind of group networking, if you will. So that's why I had numbered out the name tag so that we could do kind of a numbered shuffle at the beat or the stop of the music or whatever, but we didn't really get to that. But anyway, and we'll probably, I don't know, I think people shied away from the pure networking thing a little bit, so maybe we'll try that at some point down the line. Probably try that again.
To make it more interactive, would be to break us up into a group and look at each other's resumes, apply what you're telling us.
Okay, all right.
Is that it? Anything else? Anybody online have any comments or thoughts? Cool. Jay, thank you so very much.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Thank you all for coming.